I've worked at MTC since 1993. I started as the Director of Legislation and Public Affairs, and I was in that job for 5 years. And then when Bill Hine retired as the deputy, I moved into his slot for 2 years, and then in 2001 I became the Executive Director. So as of next month, 10 years. Boy, well, I hope my tenure's not over. So I'm still hoping that one of our biggest accomplishments will be the thing that we've been working on for most of my career here, which is getting the new east span of the Bay Bridge open for traffic, which should be in just a couple years from now. During that time, we've obviously had a lot to do with some other big projects. The one that comes right to mind is probably the BART extension to San Francisco Airport, which, like a lot of big projects, went through the perils of Pauline to get from start to finish. Well, what else is coming to mind? Well, you know, one thing we did throughout my tenure, and it more or less coincides with my tenure as Executive Director, is standing up the Bay Area Toll Authority as our alter ego when it comes to the bridges. And that process has really gone from the start of the agency in the late 90s to its maturation now as an entity that, you know, has sold $8 billion worth of debt, is now overseeing construction, not just funding projects, and is looking to grow into the future in a role not just on the toll bridges, but also in operating the high occupancy toll lane network on land. Well, it's funny because the Bay Area is a region in so many ways except politically. Politically, we are organized around cities and county boundaries, and I suppose it's always going to be that way. But in almost every other meaningful way, we are a region. The business that we worry about, transportation, people travel all over the region every day, and they don't really pay a whole lot of attention who owns the road they're on or who runs the transit system they're on. They just want to get to their destination. And that almost for every traveler spans city boundaries, at least, if not county boundaries. We're a regional airshed in terms of air quality. We're a regional watershed in terms of the bay and its tributaries. We're a regional economy. It's really not the case that, you know, we have a Mountain View economy and a Sunnyvale economy. We have a Silicon Valley economy, and the way we relate to the world is as a region, not as 100 cities or 9 counties. The Bay Area is unique in a lot of ways, and one way we're unique in terms of our regional institutions is that the role that MTC performs as the Metropolitan Planning Organization that does transportation work, and the role that ABAG performs as the Council of Governments. In every other major metropolitan area in California, they are one and the same agency. Here, for a lot of reasons that date back to the mystery, or rather the misty distant past, for a lot of reasons we're different. And so the challenge we have here to begin with is in performing functions that are usually integrated, making sure that we get them taken care of even though we are 2 separate institutions. You know, someone once said, and I remember it to this day, that transportation is a lousy master but a good servant. And I think too often transportation, when it's isolated by itself, can, like a lot of public policy areas, think that it's the end-all and be-all of every conversation that comes up. And transportation is not an end-all and be-all. Transportation is a means to maximize other values. And I think it's unfortunate in a way that MTC, since it is created as a transportation agency, has to continually, I think, fight off that tendency to believe that transportation is the only thing we need to worry about. So many of our transportation problems really don't have a lot to do with roads and bridges and transit systems, they have to do with the fact that people aren't living close enough to where they want to work and where they want to do other activities. And so right away you bump your head into the land use question, which is really the cart, you know, that is, or rather that's the horse and transportation's the cart. We need to follow along with the land use decisions that are made in the region. And the disconnect in our region and elsewhere is that transportation decisions largely are made on a regional basis, but land use decisions are made by individual jurisdictions here in the Bay Area. And I think our effort right now that we are working with ABAG, it's called the Sustainable Community Strategy, is to try to match up those two subject areas in a much better way. We are not trying to disturb or alter the fundamental institutional relationship, which is that transportation will continue to be a regional concern and land use decisions will continue to be a local prerogative. But we are trying to make sure that we're both headed toward the same outcomes, which is a more sustainable region, a more affordable region, and a region with the quality of life that we've all come to enjoy. And look, that's the challenge of trying to integrate MTC and ABAG is tough enough. When you bring the Air Quality District and BCDC to the table, you're really talking about a challenge because the fact is the four agencies are very different. MTC is a funder, ABAG is a planning agency, the Air District is a regulator, and BCDC is to some extent as well. Of the four agencies, BCDC is the only one with land use power because it has the power to permit or not permit certain uses near the bay itself. So the challenge of integrating our work is a formidable one. I think it's made a lot easier by the goodwill among the four agencies, and my counterparts at the other three agencies are all great guys, and I think we get along personally and professionally quite well, but there are times when we bump into each other in terms of our institutional roles and in terms of the mandates that we've each been given. MTC is a great place to work. One reason I've enjoyed it these last 17 years is that there is always a new challenge. And I think like a lot of strong organizations, MTC is constantly evolving, constantly changing, constantly taking on new responsibilities. And that, I think, is what has really kept us relevant. We started as a planning organization. That's what we were set up to do, create a regional transportation plan for the Bay Area. And even though it may surprise some people to know it, we do have a regional transportation plan. There actually is an architecture that we're trying to fulfill here. But we have gone well beyond that subject. And if we were only a planning agency, I think we'd be a lot less relevant. Along the way, we also acquired a good deal of funding responsibility. And they say money talks, and it certainly does. And I think a lot of people listen to our plan a lot more closely because of the money that is behind the plan. And then in recent years, I think we've taken on new responsibilities in direct operation of transportation products and services. You know, we're the folks who run the fast track toll collection system. We run the Clipper smart card program for public transit. We run the 511 website and telephone number. All of those are directly dealing with customers. We got 1 million fast track customers, several 100,000 Clipper customers. That's a lot of folks. And when you touch people's lives that directly, it's not like a planning exercise where you see them every couple of years and ask them to dream about the future. You're hearing about their complaint about why their Clipper card didn't work yesterday and what they want you to do to fix it. So I think what has remained really exciting about MTC is the fact that I think we do our work well, and I think the legislature and others, when they see somebody do good work, they tend to give them more. And we've been happy to take it on. MTC in the early days was again getting organized. It was getting set up, and I think some people may not realize that MTC and ABAG have been together really this whole time. We both started operation at the Claremont Hotel. I often joke with my friends that I have the curse of working in an agency after it's left the cool location, because I would have loved to work at the Claremont Hotel. But we started there, and really we're getting, I think, our sea legs for the first several years. And then started, I think, hitting our stride in the 80s especially. And some things that people take for granted now, they probably don't know that was us. But for example, the BART Muni Fast Pass that people now use on Clipper, but that instrument, that idea of being able to transfer from one system to the other seamlessly, that was something MTC got going. And there are agreements and milestones like that throughout the decades that we've been involved in. The other big achievement in the 80s was forging a consensus agreement for rail expansion in the region that led to the BART extension to San Francisco Airport, but also to the BART extensions to Dublin, to Pittsburgh, to the light rail extension to the ballpark in San Francisco, in the Tasman corridor in Silicon Valley. I think one of the places where we really do try to add value, and one of the reasons we were created, admittedly, is that, you know, the Bay Area is a competitive place, and sometimes we're a little too competitive. And we used to have a habit of going to Washington and competing against each other, instead of trying to compete against Portland or Denver or New York. And MTC was created to try to sort of herd the cats here in the Bay Area, cut the deal back home, and then go shop it in Washington and Sacramento, where the competition is quite fierce and where you're just not going to do as well if you're getting in your own way. Look, if you've got cats, you know that it's a pretty difficult task, and every once in a while they're just going to get away from you, and that certainly has happened to us. But I think on balance we have done better than most, and I do point, I think, with a good deal of pride, together with my immediate predecessor Larry Doms, who was doing the job for twice as long as I've done it, that we've delivered quite a bit of revenue and resource from Washington, from Sacramento to the Bay Area. The fortunate thing for us, dirty little secret, is Los Angeles is really still good at fighting with themselves. And so we can often go to Sacramento and do a bit better than they are because they still haven't figured out how to get the deal done at home. I think we have been a national leader, and we sometimes joke that we're on the bleeding edge, you know, B-L-E-E-D-I-N-G, because when you're out there ahead of everybody else, you really don't have anyone to show you the way. And you make a lot of mistakes because you're new and you're doing something new. And I think that's been sort of the price of leadership, if you want to call it that. But I think the reward of it is being able to blaze new territory, break new ground, and help bring other folks along. The sustainable community strategy that we are working on with ABAG right now, that is going to be a national trendsetter. And frankly, it's a bit odd to me that we're trying to deal with a global problem of climate change with a regional policy here in the Bay Area. You know, we're a big, important region in the United States, but in terms of the world, we're a drop in the bucket. I think where we are important is as a leader and as an example. And that's where I hope that our work in climate change and some other areas will not just be an example that I hope one of these days Congress and our federal government will emulate, but that perhaps can be a shining light around the world. One other way that I think is quite important, it's a bit arcane to perhaps some, but I think the result is quite important in people's lives, and that's this notion of funding flexibility. You know, for a long time under our federal government, you know, if you wanted to do federal highway work and you were given federal interstate money, you had sort of three choices about spending that money. You could build an interstate, or build an interstate, or build an interstate. That was your choice. What we pioneered, and my predecessor Larry Doms had a lot to do with this personally, a lot of hours on a plane between here and Washington, was pioneering the notion of using federal highway funds in particular much more flexibly, so that now we have a fairly large pool of federal dollars that we get from Washington, and we can spend them to build or improve roads, but we can also spend them on local streets, we can spend them on public transit, we can spend them on bike paths. There are some, in fact, including me, who might argue that we've perhaps taken the concept of flexibility a bit too far, and it's no longer as easy to tell what the federal interest is in all those various expenditures. But I do think there is no question that having that flexibility has been essential to try to deal with the myriad of challenges that the nation face. We're a very diverse country. And if Minnesota or if Wisconsin or if Montana, if they want to spend all their money on highways, God bless them. In the Bay Area here, we don't. We've got quite a lot of other challenges we want to confront. And I think that flexibility is essential. I think ABAG has a very important mission to play, and it's not such a tangible one, perhaps, as the role that MTC plays. And I do regard ABAG as a bit of the keeper of the flame for regionalism. Because in the case of MTC, we're pursuing a transportation mandate. In the case of the Air Quality District, their job is air quality. In the case of BCDC, it's Bayfill. And even though all of us have a regional framework or jurisdiction, none of us are thinking perhaps as broadly as we should, and I think as broadly as ABAG often has, about what regionalism really means in all of its manifestations. And I think, in a way, even though it's as I said earlier, not so tangible, I think that's maybe ABAG's most important job, is to keep their eye on the notion of the Bay Area as a region, and why, and we often think about the 3 E's, with equity and the environment and the economy, why all 3 of those things really can best be pursued when we pull together as a region and pursue them together. Regionalism is one of those things where if you asked probably 100 people in the room watching this video, they're going to have 100 different answers about what it ought to be. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people, when they confront the subject of regionalism, they sort of jump to this question of institutions. And they'll tell you that, well, what we really need to do is we need to take power away from the cities and give it to somebody else, or we need to merge MTC and ABAG, or as was the case a few years ago, we need to merge all those regional agencies together. I'm not sure that's the answer. I'm not here to defend the exact composition of every political jurisdiction in the Bay Area. I think we sort of love government so much that we've got too much of it in our region, like 24 transit operators as an example. But I think that focus on regionalism really misses a broader point, that there's a lot we can do by working together, by partnering, by cooperating. And I don't think there's really any kind of challenge that's too big for people who have goodwill and people who are willing to let others take credit. Our immediate task, MTC and ABAG, is to adopt a sustainable community strategy by 2013, come hell or high water, because we've got deadlines under state law and we've got to get through the process and do it. I'll tell you, it's a very big handful because neither of us have done this before. We are used to doing our work separately, where ABAG does projections about population and economic growth. They do a housing needs process. We do a transportation plan, and sort of never the twain shall meet. All of that has been thrown together by the statute that the state legislature passed a few years ago. And so that is an enormous challenge that we're working through now. I think the reason the challenge is worthwhile, though, is that, in my opinion, those activities never should have been apart. And whether ABAG and MTC are one agency or 2 or 3, The fact is that work belongs together. And in a way, shame on us for not thinking of it before the legislature did, but I'm glad they did so. Sometimes we need a kick in the pants to get out of our own little silos. And they've certainly given us a big, swift kick. And we've got that challenge ahead of us. Once we get that behind us, I think those subjects naturally lead you in similar directions. And the fact is, you know, the Air Quality District and BCDC very recently, and I'll say not without controversy, have both been issuing policies about climate change. And we are all, I think, still feeling our way toward a better and more coordinated effort to tackle the problem. But the fact is, it raises very important conflicts and questions for all four agencies. If the planet warms, sea levels will rise. If sea levels rise, and we want to put a lot of infill housing near the bay where we are already developed, then we're going to have to protect that development from the sea level rising. And we have to acknowledge the fact that in a lot of those existing communities where we want to put more housing and more growth, we have a lot of freeways and other sources of air contaminants that we've got to deal with because we don't want to put folks in harm's way. So the fact is, you know, the good work is hard work because it's worth doing, and it's worth doing to get through those conflicts and figure out where you can to find the win-wins that will let us get to the goal we all share. Well, it does seem to me, and look, this may be my own memory playing tricks on me, but it does seem to me that 18 years ago, both Washington and Sacramento worked a lot better than they do now. The degree of partisanship, you know, Sacramento now has term limits, which I think have been a disaster for providing continuing leadership in our state. In Washington, we've been waiting for the next authorization of the federal transportation program for a couple of years now, and I'm not even sure it's in sight yet. It is, I think, in both places, a very difficult environment in which to work. That's one reason why, over that period of time, I think we've been lucky in pursuing a strategy that says, let's try to get as many of the decisions that used to be made in Washington or Sacramento delegated down to us, because we're not polarized, you know, we're nonpartisan. And generally speaking, you don't hear or see party politics in our meetings. What you see are our local elected officials, I think, trying to do their best and trying to reach the right decision, whatever their party affiliation might be. And I think maybe the best solution to the kind of gridlock we have, especially I think in Sacramento, where the institutional overlay is so difficult, and where as a result of all these voter mandates and 2/3 vote questions, even though we may have dealt with that for the budget, it's still there for taxes. I'm not sure Sacramento is fixable. And maybe the best thing we could do is try to get more authority out of there and down to the regional and local level where we can take the ball and run with it.
18 years is a long time to be with one agency, and also just in terms of personal maturation. If you could, given the benefit of the hindsight that you have now, if you could do something differently or have a do-over, you have a list of those things? You
know, I'm not sure I do, because, you know, the question, you know, 18 years is a long time with one agency, and I suppose the answer is yes, it would be. But I don't feel like I've been with one agency, to be perfectly honest about it. I mean, for one thing, over that period of time, I've been personally involved in creating the Bay Area Toll Authority, and in standing it up and in watching it mature and take on more and more, not just financial, but operational and construction-related responsibility. That's been immensely gratifying. And so if MTC were standing still, I suppose I'd be bored stiff by now, but it's not. And I think it's always impressed me, both before I came to work here and now that I have been here for some time, about how agile and nimble and change-oriented that the agency is. And if it were any other type of organization, I might have left a long time ago. But what keeps me coming to work every day is the sense that there's probably going to be some new challenge showing up that I didn't even know about. And then I'm going to have to think my way through a set of problems. And we're going to be tackling some new idea together. Goodness gracious. In 1971, I was in junior high school, I suppose. I wasn't even in high school yet. And it's funny, we have, a lot of people have long memories here in transportation circles, and we have litigation ongoing right now that dates back to decisions that were made in the mid-1970s. And so maybe I'm a bit at a loss for not having been here since the very beginning. But I also think that maybe after 30 years it's time to start arguing about something else. Well, see, I'm now the second longest serving executive director, so good for me. I will never be the first because I'm not going to last 10 more years in this job. But, you know, it is the case that I am really blessed, I suppose cursed in a way as well, to follow a guy like Larry Doms. Cursed, I say, because he just set such a high bar and such a wonderful example, but blessed because both he and Bill Hine, and Bill was his Robin to his Batman for a long time. The two of them were a team. They really built the agency to the thing it is today, and I just enjoy taking the car for a spin that they put together because it's a nice ride. And it works really well, and the solid foundation they gave us is what has enabled us to be successful when we go into the toll collection business, or we go into the smart card business, or we try to fashion a sustainable community strategy. It's really the strength of the organization that they left us that allows us to take all those liberties with what they gave us.